Okay, the SUNCOAST Parkway is under construction in Citrus County. There's going to be a new interchange at Cardinal Street. That's what we're here to talk about today. I'm Steve Locknick. I'm the Assistant County Administrator for Citrus County. I've also been a professional planner for 26 years.
And I'm Michael Sherman. I'm the Growth Management Director for Citrus County, and I've been a professional planner for about 32 years. So today we've got a number of items we'd like to speak to the public about, and wanted to briefly go over them before we get into the presentation. First, we're going to talk about the purpose of our online presentation and why we're doing this and why we're here. Next, we're going to go over the January 30th public information workshop that we had. We'd like to then discuss some planning and land development tools, and follow that up with some examples of mixed-use developments in Florida that we think are good examples, and then sort of go over some time frames and what's next. So really what we want to do with this presentation and what we've wanted to do since the beginning is engage the public. We want to engage the public in the land use planning program that the county is going to undertake at the Cardinal Street interchange. And through this planning program, we'd like to help, we'd like for the participants to help us provide a vision for the community today, as well as in the future in the Cardinal area.
And we would have liked to have had this meeting in person with people, but the current situation doesn't allow for that. We hope this is a good substitute. I hope we'll be able to still facilitate a good conversation with the community this way.
So first I want to give a little orientation to the project itself. What this map shows is the corridor and the right-of-way for the new SUNCOAST Parkway. It's about a little over 13 miles long, and right in the middle is the Cardinal Street interchange, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So the county's already had one public workshop, and we held that on January 30th at the Homosassa Library. We had pretty good attendance. We think about 60 people attended, and at that meeting the county staff had maps of the area. We had some graphics and photographs showing the general area and the area that would be impacted by the new parkway. But mostly what we wanted to do at that meeting was listen and learn from the public.
That's Mike and Steve in the picture there. I'm on the right and Mike's on the left.
So one of the areas there was a lot of discussion is what we call the interchange management area. And what this map shows is the new SUNCOAST Parkway going north and south, and then right in the middle you'll see the new interchange on Cardinal Street, and then the polygon or the area in gold is what we call the interchange management area. And this is going to be the focus of our planning program throughout this comp plan amendments.
And this has historically been a very rural area. There's some residences there. There's a few old businesses along a few of the spots. With the new interchange, the whole traffic pattern and dynamic of this community is going to change gradually over time, and that's what we're going to plan for today.
So at the meeting there was a whole lot of questions that the county staff was asked, and we've listed a number of them on the next few slides, calling them frequently asked questions. And one of the main questions we got over and over again is, will the zoning on my property change? And the county's not going to go out there and rezone individual parcels of lands. If there are any rezonings, they'll be petitioned by individual property owners and not the county. Now this is not to say that there won't be any rezonings, but those rezonings will not be petitioned by the county staff.
And there'll be a public hearing process for each one of those rezonings also.
Another question we were asked a lot is, how's Cardinal Street going to operate once this parkway comes in the new interchange, and would it turn into a commercial corridor? And the county staff's pretty we're pretty confident that we will be able to come up with a future land use map category that's going to direct and guide growth in an appropriate way that's going to be good for the area and not have a stripped out commercial corridor. Next question was about the land use plan itself and how would it be adopted and what was the process for that. Well, all land use decisions are adopted by ordinance in Citrus County, and they're adopted by the county Board of County Commissioners. And all comprehensive plan amendments will also be adopted by ordinance, and these public hearings, these amendments will all be subject to public hearings. Another one was about wildlife corridors, and people seem to be very concerned about having the ability for animals to cross back and forth underneath the parkway, and wanted to know if the county was planning on providing any wildlife corridors on the parkway. And the county will be working with FDOT to do that. Along this 13-mile corridor, there's going to be a couple of parkway of wildlife crossings that allow game to move back and forth underneath the parkway itself. We also asked participants at the first workshop what did they want to see in the Cardinal Street corridor. And one of the reoccurring themes that we heard were development and businesses that produce jobs. People wanted to see clean development, see green manufacturing and sustainable development. And if there was light industry or factory jobs, they wanted them proximate to the interchange at Cardinal. Other uses that we heard were shopping opportunities, restaurants, food choices, mixed-use developments, affordable housing, and multifamily housing. What about public service? Because that's one thing that we did hear a lot about as well. And people were looking forward to increased law enforcement, possibility for access to county potable water, shoulders on Cardinal Street itself. They were looking to have that improved, sidewalks and side trails, and then a fire station as well. And the good news about the fire station is the county's already purchased property for a new fire station, and that'll be developed concurrent with the business development and land development on Cardinal Street. We also asked people what they did not want to see. And again, those themes were pretty consistent throughout. And first one we heard a number of times is they did not want to see heavy industrial uses along that corridor or at the interchange. People did not want to see warehouses or a large truck stop. And they did not want to see urban or rural sprawl spread out along the entire corridor itself.
There were some common themes that we heard throughout the workshop, and that was one for a mix of land uses, for a more compact and coordinated development. We don't want to just have a commercial strip or spot zoning of odd properties that don't necessarily interact with each other well. So we're looking at considering all the options and evaluating different approaches for land use and zoning. And but we start by listening to the public. Now this is an example of what you get if you don't plan for development. Just strip commercial. It could be anywhere in America. You see lots of big signs. You see disconnected parking lots. You see no attention, no coordination between any of the properties or any of the properties behind those properties.
So to address that type of non-planning development and to address what we heard at the meeting, staff has been looking at a number of different planning options. The first one we looked at was single-use Euclidean zoning, performance zoning, and we did some looking at form-based codes, the traditional neighborhood design approach, and then mixed-use development. So the first planning tool that we looked at was the single-use Euclidean zoning. And this is probably the oldest form of zoning in the United States. And really this is characterized by separation of land uses into specified districts or zones, along with dimensional standards stipulating limitations on development activity within each of those districts. In its purest form, there's really no mixing of uses at all. The single-family homes are separated from the commercial uses that are separated from institutional and educational uses. It's a form that, while it has some benefits, it has a lot of unintended consequences.
And the approval process for this is difficult also, because typically when something doesn't fit, we end up doing a lot of conditional approvals, and those tend to be unpredictable sometimes. So it doesn't fit a lot of situations, it's not flexible, and when you are flexible, it's unpredictable. Now, performance zoning is a little different. Performance zoning, you put emphasis on your measurable standards, maximum height, floor area, coverage, impervious, parking, all good standards to have. And more typically, the approach here is a by right use, where if a developer meets the standards, they go forward. It's more predictable, and it has some advantages. Now, a form-based code is quite different than the other two. Here, the emphasis is on design. And by design, I mean the way the building approaches the street, the way the pedestrian is accommodated. The emphasis is first to the pedestrian and pedestrian scale. So the streets, you don't see blank walls. You see windows. You see lots of points of interest. You see landscaping. You see on-street parking, which helps separate the sidewalk from the street. It's very desirable, very attractive looking, but it's really more suited to more urbanized areas. So now another concept that we've worked with is traditional neighborhood development, also called TND, where we promote it's essentially building a new town like an old town might have looked, where you have more compact form, a mix of land uses, and a range of housing types. These are some examples, and what you see are very different appearances. Each one of these communities is designed with emphasis on appearance, and hopefully it's adapted to the local conditions too, in terms of topography and some of the landscaping. The principles of TND: you have a compact development, mix of land uses, it's very walkable, variety of dwelling units. You have units that are above some of those businesses. You also have a strong sense of place and identity. Businesses can come and go over the years, but the character and identity of the community will remain. There's lots of benefits. There's a real sense of place. This creates enduring value. Like I say, as businesses and residences change over the year, the character of the community remains. The open space is well protected and very much enjoyed by the residents. It's the infrastructure costs are actually minimized because you have a more compact design. Things are closer together, which also makes it much more walkable.
So another form that we looked at was mixed-use development, and mixed-use development is a form that contains a mix of two or more uses that are proximate to each other. Usually it's residential, retail, commercial, employment, sometimes in the same building, sometimes in a larger development. One of the first things that really comes to mind when I think about mixed-use development is typically a retail business on the first floor with apartments on the upper floor. And this is really a popular setup for mixed-use development, but it's not the only type of mixed-use development. It's actually, this is referred to as a vertical mixed use. And in vertical mixed use developments, the lower floors are generally designated for commercial uses in the upper floors.
And what we see here too, Mike, is that it's something of a hybrid of some of the other things we were just talking about. It has some of the elements of the T&D, it has some elements of the performance-based combined together in whichever way works best for that community.
That's right. It creates normally a walkable community as well. There's a lot of benefits of mixed-use development. We've listed a few of those. Definitely supports placemaking. When you're in a mixed-use development, generally you get a feeling like you're somewhere. It's not urban sprawl. It's not like a traditional single-use Euclidean zoning type development. And mixed-use development generally has the 3 Ds of population density, land use diversity, and they're definitely pedestrian friendly. And this is a typical example of a vertical mixed-use development where you've got the first floor of more public type uses of retail, commercial, shops. And as you go on the upper 2 floors, you get into residential or private uses. The second and third floors oftentimes are office or residential. And this is an example of a horizontal mixed use. And the horizontal mixed use really is where you have a multitude of different types of uses, generally in a larger development, proximate and adjacent to each other. You'll have some vertical mix, but generally it's different uses all adjacent to each other.
It's important to see too that they share the same space, they even share the same parking areas. And that makes for a more efficient use of those areas rather than having separate parking lots for each use. Here's kind of the ideal form of a traditional neighborhood. You have a nice center square green, which is like your public gathering space. Fronting along that green, you'll have some institutional type uses. You might have some multi-story type buildings, either offices or residential units. And as you radiate out from the center, you get into less intense single family type of uses. So now we got some examples that Mike and I have worked with and have spent time in, I guess, over the years. We're going to talk about a few of those.
So this is downtown Dade City, and if anybody has been to downtown Dade City, they'll realize that is a good, typical example of a traditional neighborhood design, or T&D. It's got a great mix of uses. There's both vertical and horizontal mix, where there's businesses and retail and restaurants on first floors with residences and offices on the second floors. The relationships of the building to the street is very good. There's wide sidewalks. It's very walkable. It's a good example of both horizontal and vertical mixed use. The next one is downtown Crystal River, and I think everybody's pretty familiar with Crystal River. Crystal River is a great example of what I would call a horizontal mixed-use development. There's businesses that are single-use, generally single-story, but you'll have a good, rich mix of uses that includes restaurants and retail and commercial, as well as some residential. They say that they share the same public spaces, and they are proximate to each other. It's very walkable. It's a good example of horizontal mixed use.
And I would also observe that the downtown Inverness area has a very similar character and shares some of those same traits, the way they share parking in public areas. Now, looking a little to our north, in the Gainesville area, there's a well-known community in the planning trade, and that is the HAILE Plantation. They have a village center area. It's about 150 acres, where it's a very thoughtfully designed mixed-use community. It has the offices and businesses and retail establishments on the first floor, restaurants and what have you, with residences above and some offices above. The green space and the common areas are not very large, but they're very well designed and very central between some of the buildings, and they're very popular gathering places for social events, when we had social events. Town of Tioga is another community about 2 or 3 miles away from HAILE, and it's a more intense version, a little more recent. This one started development really in the 1990s, and it's still very much under construction in some parts, lots of phases. But you see a higher density residential component and some bigger restaurants and what have you. This is a restaurant and residential units here on the right. And it's a very popular place. Lots of public events occur at these communities. They're popular with people not only within the communities, but people from surrounding areas frequently gather at events in these communities. Likewise, on an even greater scale, is the BALDWIN Park project in Orlando. This was an 1,100-acre naval training ground that was abandoned in the 90s. In 2003, well, before they broke ground in 2003, the city had a competition to find the best developer for this property, and they got together and they put together a really thoughtful, comprehensive plan. They've created what has become a very attractive and very desirable community. And it's not just high-end. It has a very strong mix of uses. There are residential units that are very affordable, side by side with much more upscale units, but you wouldn't know the difference from street level. It's all very pedestrian oriented. It's very popular. It's a very attractive place, and it's one that has enduring value. You can see the quality of this community will be great for 10 years, 20 years, and indefinitely into the future. It has that quality. So for concluding comments, Mike and I, had that first workshop, and we listened to the public, and we talked about some of these ideas. There was a lot of interest in doing some mixed uses, and we have considered many of the more progressive and more recent approaches to mixed use, land use, and zoning. And we see an emphasis here, looking at the ground in a place we're working with, that the most intense uses should be right near the interchange. As we get away from the interchange, though, I think there's a really good opportunity for some of that traditional neighborhood type design and development. There will have to be some massing of properties. Right now, a lot of the properties are broken up into smaller holdings. But to make some of these projects occur, we're going to need to see some of those acreages be combined. Staff will be working to draft a comprehensive plan amendment that will hopefully facilitate allowing that type of development to happen more easily in that location.
So what are the next steps? Well, from the beginning, the county staff has worked to engage the public and take comments and listen. So we would like to continue that. We would like to hear from you. At the end of this presentation is contact information, my email and my phone number, and I would like if you all would give me your thoughts and your opinions on what you heard today and how you think that corridor could be improved. So then we're going to collect comments from the general public and interested persons. We're going to review those, and then we're going to prepare a draft future land use map, comprehensive plan amendment, and create a new category for the future land use element. Once we do that, we're going to have it available for public comments, so we can again hear back from the public on what they think of what we've done at this point. Once we get that, we're going to formally present that to the Planning and Development Commission and then to the County Board of Commissioners. So what are the timelines? We'd like to get public comments by June 30th. That should give us time to incorporate all the comments, consider all the comments before we prepare the documents for public hearing.
And I'd say, Mike, we'd like to talk with people and hear what you have to say, but if you write some written comments, those will become part of the record and will become part of the report as we go forward with this to the Planning Board and to the Board of County Commissioners.
So once we get comments, we'd like to go ahead and schedule a public hearing before our Planning and Development Commission. Our target meeting is August 20th of this year. Once we get through that, we're going to schedule a transmittal public hearing before the County Commission on September 22nd. Once that hearing occurs, we'll be transmitting the comprehensive plan amendment to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity for the agency review and regulatory review at the state level. And then once we do that, we'll hear back from DEO and have an adoption public hearing for a new future land use map category. Our target date is November 17th of 2020. So here's my contact information for any questions or comments the public may have. Again, my name is Michael Sherman. I'm the Director of the Growth Management Department for Citrus County. There's my email address. It's michael.sherman@citrusbocc.com. There's my direct phone number, 352-527-5220. Please give me a call. I'd like to hear your thoughts and comments on the Cardinal Street interchange and development in the interchange management area.
We look forward to hearing from you.